meeting. My name is, looking up here, okay, great. My name is Gary Gerzatis. I'm the Executive Director for Corporate and Foundation Relations here at Syracuse University. And on behalf of Syracuse, I want to welcome you all to the conference and to the COE. We're delighted that you're here today. As smart cities continue to be playing such a bigger role in every facet of life, we're delighted with the work that you all are doing and wish you continued success on your efforts. With that, I'm going to introduce Kevin Croston, the Assistant Dean for Research in the iSchool, to say a few words.
So as was said, I'm Kevin Croston. I'm Associate Dean for Research. It's my pleasure to add my welcome on behalf of the School of Information Studies, which is one of the co-hosts for this, especially given the external environment. Seeing so many people in the room is really terrific. And of course, I welcome everyone who's joining us on the web. Smart cities, as was mentioned, is a growing trend, an important topic, and I think a perfect embodiment of the kind of research that typifies our iSchool. It has a perspective that includes both people and technical aspects. It harnesses a solid research background, research base, but also advances important societal interests. So it brings together all of the things that we like to see in the research: people, technology, solid research findings, and important benefits. And of course, there couldn't be a more pressing topic in that area than today's, ensuring that these systems work in a way that really safeguards privacy and security and takes that into account. And so being able to provide guidance to the many people who are trying to implement these sorts of systems is a very important topic, and one that I think will be a good topic. I can see from the agenda, and I'm sorry I can't actually join you for most of it, that you have a very busy day. And so I hope that today's discussions inspire ideas and insights about how to make the vision of smart cities closer to fruition. So welcome again, and with that, I will turn it over to, Lee, to kick off today's activities. So welcome, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Kevin and Gary, for that kind introduction and welcome. We're pleased to be here with you physically and virtually for this third Secure Cloud Architecture Action Cluster meeting. As Kevin noted, we have a full program over the next 2 hours. We'll bring together a number of different people from multiple universities, from our own students, faculty, and industry and government partners. And that perfectly embodies the spirit of public-private partnership. And I'll pause there to turn it to my friend and co-chair of this Secure Cloud Architecture Action Cluster, who is wearing, I guess, multiple hats here as a co-chair. Yusuf, please say hello.
Good morning. My name is Yusuf Abdulkadir. I am, in one hat, the director for the ACLU for this region. So the ACLU of New York has offices across New York State, and I manage our Central New York office. In that vein, I'm deeply concerned about these issues and deeply interested in these issues, because smart cities is really the manifestation of a proliferation of our data everywhere around us where we go. And there are legitimate civil liberty concerns that could be brought about these issues. I think it's exciting, and I think the excitement often doesn't allow us to think critically about the impact that this technology and these technologies can have on communities from a surveillance perspective, from a privacy perspective, from a whole host of perspectives that we are deeply interested in and are happy with this kind of discussion and collaboration to help the city of Syracuse be a smart city in every way, shape, and form. The other hat that I wear is as an adjunct faculty in the iSchool, where I teach information policy. So that's one, and I guess maybe a third as a concerned citizen in Syracuse. But this collaboration really is more than just identifying how do you develop a cloud architecture that creates the mechanisms to ensure that people's privacy is protected with controlled access. But it also is about how do we make sure that we don't lose people? How do we make sure that we are doing this in a way that is inclusive? You know, Syracuse has the highest concentration of poverty amongst Blacks and Latinos in the country, and is the 9th most segregated county in the country. This transformation can have significant impacts for ensuring that those communities have an equal opportunity and an equal footing to be a part of this new emerging tech industry in Syracuse. And we want to make sure that that is a part of the fore and not a secondary afterthought. I could say a lot, but I want to be respectful of the others who are here. But thank you for coming. Thank you for being part of this work. And we really look forward to working collaboratively to make sure that we are using Syracuse and this collaboration as a model for other cities and communities around the country and around the world.
Thanks so much, Yusuf, for that. I should have mentioned that my name is Lee McKnight. I'm an associate professor in the School of Information Studies, co-chair of the Secure Cloud Architecture Action Cluster. We're going to talk more about that in a minute, but first I also forgot to mention and say appropriately, I acknowledge with respect the Onondaga Nation, fire keepers of the Haudenosaunee, the indigenous people on whose ancestral lands Syracuse University now stands. In the room, we have a number of faculty and students working on a number of issues around inclusion and diversity and further research that we'll talk about later on in the program. I'll just close this portion now to highlight essentially the overall purpose of the meeting, which is to review and get some level of acceptance on the Secure Cloud Architecture document. I already noticed one mistake on the front page where we left out the important names of the two students who made such, and recent graduates who made such contributions to the work, Paul Rai and Skylar Hall, who are sitting here looking at me a little annoyed that their names aren't right there. So I have to, obviously we need to do a reprint. And I apologize for that. But the overall document now is essentially reformatted from what people who've been at the first or second Secure Cloud Architecture Action Cluster meeting into what looks like a chapter, because this would be going into we propose, if people here in the room and online don't object and say we should start over with more than just 2 more names on the cover, a risk management approach to smart city cybersecurity and privacy, which is a guidebook from a public-private partnership of the Global City Team Challenge, Safe and Secure City and Community Challenge of the National Institute of Standards and Technology. NIST does a lot of great work. They don't do great acronyms. So we have our own not so great acronym here. This is the Cloud Privacy, Security, and Rights Inclusive Architecture, which fortunately is easy to pronounce, SRIA. So this, if this meeting, where we will discuss SRIA a little bit later on, if nobody objects too strongly, then this goes on and becomes part of a guidebook, which is already on a fast track, already starting to turn into an official NIST Smart and Safe City and Community Framework Series standard. So this is like one step further toward becoming a public standard of the federal government. Not right now, it's just a work that we and this group of action cluster partners starting from the work here in Syracuse have developed. And we look forward to having a discussion on this and a number of other topics. Next slide. So beyond the chapter, the program will be talking about distributed energy future, advancing internet ecosystems, cybersecurity systems analysis, community resilience innovation, advancing Syracuse inclusively, and blockchain or decentralized local energy markets. All of these with, as Yusuf highlighted, with very importantly, privacy, security, and rights inclusive approaches to ensure that this is not just some level of technical progress, but really advances community goals and interests of everybody living here and in other cities around the world. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Dave Adkins, our first keynoter, with the CIO of NYSERDA, who is just coming forward now. And I'll let him say another word to introduce him further. Thanks so much, Dave, for joining us.
Thanks. Oh, awesome. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to see students in person. I teach online, so it's really nice to once in a while see people. I was kidding Lee when I got here. It was so nice you gave me a nice Syracuse weather welcome. I graduated here in 1982, and I've so missed these winters. I live in Albany, so it's not that far away. And welcome to all the folks who are online as well. I wanted to give you a quick view of the agenda I was going to follow. Think of this as kind of an inverted pyramid. We start wide with our distributed energy future policy, specific to New York State, and then I'll run it up to the rest of the country. We'll start diving down into the smart grid and the meters that hang off that grid. Start talking about a big change coming in terms of electric vehicles, EVs, you'll hear me call them that. Keep condensing down to smart cities and things, and then finally look at the cyber physical impact as we go through this. So hope that gives you a good taste of what's in for. First couple slides are going to go through quick. These are my official NYSERDA marketing slides. So I'll warn you about that. But it is significant. Last year, the New York State passed the CLCPA, Climate Leadership Community Protection Act. That's why we call it the CLCPA. It's hard to remember. And there's a couple of key pieces in this that are rather significant. One of those is that by 2025, we're looking to incent into the marketplace, get installed about 6,000 megawatts of distributed solar. So we're kind of moving away from centralized generation in the grid and 1,000 points of light, if you will, or 1,000 points of using light to generate energy. Sun has a nasty habit of every night of going away. So we're also incenting and moving into the marketplace in New York State about 3,000 megawatts of storage. So you'll see a couple of slides later on storage as well. Quite a bit of activity going on, and all of this is around a rather aggressive target in New York of 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040. That sounds like a long time away, 20 years, but that's all of the fossil fuel plants no longer producing energy. So that's goodbye to natural gas, goodbye to coal. I think there still is one coal peaker plant left in New York State. A peaker plant is one that comes online when you need peak energy, so it doesn't run all the time. So quite a bit of operations going on with moving to a clean energy economy, and dare I say, a single source of our heating, our transportation. Hold that thought, I'll get to that a little bit as well. Other states are not far behind. New York's the Excelsior state, so we're leading, I guess. We're trying to get that all done by 2040, but that's a quick snapshot. And my understanding is these slides will be available to you afterwards. I'll look at some of the other states and where they are and moving ahead with this clean energy, this clean distributed energy. Hold that thought too. The other piece that's kind of exciting is you're looking at the East Coast right there off of Long Island, and those two little areas that are highlighted here and here are where 2 wind farms are going, hopefully by 2023, 2024. We actually put these out to bid last year in 2019 and awarded 2 contracts for just shy of 1.9 gigawatts of wind storage. That's a lot of wind storage that's going in out there. And we're actually doing another round of procurement for more wind power out in that area. Now, some of you who are astute are going, wow, the New York State energy system is off of Rhode Island, and that's federal area out there in the ocean. That's all run by NOAA. So yes, you can actually have, and I didn't show you Jersey, or New Jersey. Those will all be down there as well. So a lot of wind power coming along as well. But again, distributed energy resources. You'll hear me say that a lot. DER is what we call it at NYSERDA. And so a lot more distribution and a lot more complexity in the energy grid is coming. Last piece I'll leave you with is we've already done quite a number of renewable energy projects, both solar, wind, and also some storage, about 46 since 2017. So what used to be 8 investor-owned utilities, who are predominantly generating most of the power for the grid right now, people like National Grid, Con Ed, all around the state. I forget what Syracuse is incumbent. Who do you have out here? National Grid. Okay. So we're actually building additional generation and storage capacity through some of our programs. Quite a bit of infrastructure going in. So if you put that all together, kind of a puzzle, but sitting in the middle is this idea of electrification. So how many of you heat with heating oil or natural gas? Sure. Yeah, propane, I'm the same. So that's quite a distribution system we have right now. We have lots of little pockets of energy. Most of you drove one of those little pockets of energy here today because you have a car with gas in it. So that's all these different distributed fuel sources. Electrification is moving all those energy sources into one grid. So those of us in cybersecurity start going, wow, constraint, single point of failure. The grid becomes much more important along with the resilience. And so clean grid, 100% renewable energy, some on-site generation, we're going to start doing storage. All of this is around electrification, which is what's driving smart cities as we look forward. So that's where the smart grid comes in. So smart grid, I gave you a quick definition up there. It's the benefits of centralized production in the past and a distribution system with innovation and flexibility of distributed energy resources. So let's break that down a little bit. You've really got a lot of distributed generation. You've got demand response now in a smart grid. The grid in the old days, grid 1.0, was really just pumping out energy and it was consumed. Grid 2.0, which I would argue we're kind of in right now, is a little more demand management. The utilities are very focused to the substation level when they look at load. They haven't gotten to the edge yet. They haven't gotten to big business. They haven't gotten to multifamily buildings. They haven't gotten to my house. Actually, they have. I have a smart meter. I have photovoltaics in the backyard, so they actually do know a little bit more about me. But that energy grid, which was monolithic centralized control, is really moving into more microgrids. We'll talk about that as well. On-site power generation is one of our programs for large consumers. And then certainly energy storage is a big proponent or a big part of that. So a lot of words. Let's look at a picture. So if you look at the grid of, I'd argue, yesterday and today, few sources of energy, big transmission lines, and then institutions and residential properties all being consumers of the energy. The energy grid that is upon us and is growing is adding in wind, solar at grid scale meaning big, large systems of battery storage. So that's kind of supply side. So we still have to get it all around with transmission. But we're really starting to focus a lot more on site generation, on user control and monitoring. So I'm starting to dip into the world of what National Grid used to control. So I have a little program with my Nest thermostat that when there's peak loads in the summer with air conditioning, I allow them to reach in and turn down my thermostat, actually turn up my thermostat, so I'm not cooling as much. So that's a service that they actually provide, and I get a $20 gift card at the end of the year if I do that. Or I think they take it off my bill now. So, but that amount of intelligence is now moving into the grid. But keep in mind now, the utilities of the past, they previously focused on understanding this part. Now they and other stakeholders, it's not a monolithic situation there, are really starting to try to understand the loads at the edge of the grid, where they, or we would say sometimes behind the meter. So that's a whole new demand cycle where they can actually do that. Some of you may not realize that the power markets in New York State are controlled by the New York State ISO, Independent System Operator. They're over near Albany, a little town called East Greenbush, a very physically hardened and cyber secure place. Very impressive. And they're the ones who generate the markets of supply and demand, what energy costs. It's like the stock exchange that's running every day. That's moving away from centralized control and centralized data points into all these little points on the smart grid. So the grid of tomorrow, that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is this idea that there's still a command and control in the middle of all this. It has to keep track of power plants, solar wind farms, distributed generation down to businesses, communities now, all the substations, and a lot more interaction with commercial and industrial customers, and along with EVs. Hold that thought on EVs, because they're going to throw quite a bit of interest. So on the one side, utilities would believe, this is not NYSERDA talking, this is me, that they're in the best position to manage the grid, own it, control the data, the privacy aspects of that. And we've got some grid edge upstarts, folks like Tesla out in Buffalo, just ramped up another, I think they hit their 1,400 new jobs, so they won't have to pay a fine. Vivint, Sunrun, and other technology-enabled startups who are also looking to control that data. So that's going to be interesting. The command and control and the data flows in the grid of tomorrow, actually in the grid of today, there'll be monetization of data, there'll be who owns it. It'll be some interesting ideas. So the other one is my favorite. Any network people out there, cybersecurity? If I teach a couple of courses in that, I figured I'd show you the grid looking like a network, because it is. And it's becoming more and more. Those are routers in a traditional network environment. But the grid is now moving from single one-way communication to a very robust two-way communication, all the way down to my meter, which is reporting in 5-minute increments about my power usage. Because I have AMI, advanced metering infrastructure meters, because I reverse net meter off to the grid because it's photovoltaic. So this is becoming, from a cyber standpoint, a much more, let me just say, in the worlds of cybersecurity, a much larger attack surface, many more points of vulnerability. So the last piece I'll leave you with is NIST, which gives us a nice model about the smart grid, which incorporates not just the hardware and the software in there, but keep in mind there are markets where pricing is being done. There are central operations and more energy providers and energy service companies hanging off the grid. We're doing things like more efficient energy usage. So a much more complex grid is in our future. In fact, Ithaca, what's that Ithaca, about an hour away? Down there, this is a proposed buildings project down in Ithaca, which is the solar village. So it is photovoltaics, storage, zero energy use off the grid, and potentially it's a localized grid that could actually be run autonomously off the grid. That's kind of new. We always relied on the big utilities for distribution of energy, but now communities, smart cities, and even housing developments are starting to develop and push that edge of the grid to be much more complex, much more autonomous. We currently have about, last I checked, it was around 2017, about 160 microgrids with about 1.6 megawatts of capacity. We're on track for this year to be about 4.3 gigawatts of capacity in the microgrid. So complexity, no more centralized control. We talked about data a little bit earlier, which I really love this topic. I'm watching where Kirsten Gillibrand, our senator from New York, is going with their data protection agency right now at a federal level. It's fascinating. But if you look at the smart meters that are out there, there's already 70 million in place. They're giving us real-time energy data. We are running programs now at work and incenting the market to start making decisions on much smaller bits of time frame, not what you use in a month or in a day, but what you're using every 15 minutes in energy for using demand management for that. You get constant feedback on that, but in terms of privacy and personal data, and I'd love to be ACL user. So my smart meter is telling you the energy I'm using, a little bit of AI, a little bit of common sense to figure out that every morning coffee pot goes on, TV might be on, but there's a little spike toaster on. Fridge is running all day. Here's when the oven, here's the TV. Here's when my solar car, or my electric vehicle is charging in my garage. So a lot more data. That's the level of data coming back now from the grid. It's going to be AI, going to be trended, going to be used for demand management, all kinds of things. I got to look at the Nest and the Ecobee. Those are those nice little thermostats and the data sets that we get out of them, anonymized. Wow, they know an awful lot about my furnace. How long it takes to ramp up to get heat. I told them what my fuel source was. I told them the square footage of my house. All that's being used as data. So some protection issues as well. So the other piece that's really making the grid a little more complicated is energy storage. And I've got a couple of quick pictures for you up there. One is this is outside Saratoga, the biggest battery installation in New York State right now, just in the last year, I think. Although my favorite story is this little gem in Gilboa. That's a dam that creates hydro energy. You see all the transformers there. And guess what it does with excess capacity every night? Oh, maybe not every night. It pumps water back up. It's a storage device called a lake. Kinetic energy. Solar farms are starting to do this now if there is applicable landscape nearby it, where at night, during the day when the excess capacity is there, they pump some water up, and at night they run it back down through turbines. So we think, there's such amazing storage technology going on. Physics, kinetic energy has kind of nailed this one. And so energy storage and photovoltaics are actually popping up we've got a number of programs running right now with about 574 communities across New York State where they're putting in photovoltaic, some of them wind, and also adding storage. So your centralized generation of power is moving into being very distributed. Some of those are on the smart city grids that are being developed out there. So interesting place. So we're electrifying the grid. We're moving around all these distributed energy resources. So complex, multiple actors. I put a question mark after resilience. Think of the internet. I mean, there's quite an analogy to be made between where the internet is now and where the grid is heading. We have a lot of different vendors, not always great specifications, not always great standards. and they all have to collaborate together. There's quite a diversity of technology going out there. I'm working with a company right now about their solar arrays and storage going on. And the company has an interesting point. I don't want to tell you how fast my batteries discharge when they're being used to supply power. That's proprietary information. So that's going on as well in this public-private grid. So I'm going to spend a little time on electric vehicles because they're awesome. Currently, transportation is 36% of the carbon dioxide output in New York State. It's a big number. It's over a third is the transportation sector. The cars we're driving, the buses we're on, all of those are going to have an impact on the grid. In fact, I wanted to bring up a little bit about, here's our ramp up of EVs, electric vehicle registration. As you can see, we had a little dip in 2019. Some of the incentives might have gone away. But we're on track for a number of electric vehicles being on the road, ramping up significantly. In fact, the 5 major upstate cities, Syracuse is one of them, has about 1,400 buses totally. We're trying to electrify about 25% of that fleet in the next 5 years, 100% by 2035. So imagine your smart grid. Imagine the power goes out. Now the buses all stop. Can't charge them up. So a little bit of reliance on a single source of energy. And so the other thing that's out there that's going to impact us with EVs is this idea of the grid impact and the demand. So right now, a typical demand cycle in the summer is air conditioning's on from noon to 4, peak energy, that's what the markets and the ISO and all the generation in the grids kind of work towards. So now we have to deal with this fact that every night there might be a little blip as we all charge our electric vehicles. In fact, I told my wife the other day, she didn't believe me. We have 2 cars. We're a 2-car family. I said, in 5 years, we're going to be a 1-car family, maybe a none-car family. I just pull open my app. Uber will have this. And I'll ask the self-driving EV to show up at my doorstep. I only use it when I need it. So where are those going to all charge at night? So now you have this big peak of charging capacity. So all of that is a part of the problem we talked about earlier, where you're replacing this portable diesel and gas site fuel and putting it all in one place, in one grid. So the last piece I'll leave you with is smart cities and the Internet of Things. One way to look at a smart city is all of this information traveling together. None of it happens without electricity, water, transportation, public safety, healthcare, hospitals. All of that is becoming more and more reliant on the grid. So what's that mean for cyber physical issues? We've got all these distributed sources of energy, very complex, increased coordination. Don't forget the physical aspect. Those can be targeted. This is a side shot of a line that is proposed to go from Quebec through Lake Champlain into the canal and down to Queens. Bring cheap hydro from Canada down to New York City. It's an underground cable. I have a place on Lake Champlain. There's not a lot of patrolling going on Lake Champlain. So that cable's 100 feet down. Here's one coming out of sand dunes from the offshore. And all of those are now cyber physical risk points. Charging stations are a problem. In fact, there's a great document, it's put a link to it, where if you were to control the charging network, a cloud-based charging network in the future, you could simulate a demand that could actually cause a blackout. We're not there yet. We don't have that penetration of chargers, but eventually we may have that number of chargers where that's a cyber threat. There's a great YouTube video. Anybody here the artist in Germany who put 99 smartphones in a wagon and slowly rolled them down the street in the middle of the city? And Google Maps said, traffic jam. Data was manipulated about, in this case, smartphones. It could be also manipulated about the grid. So the summary I wanted to put together for you in cybersecurity was we're really moving away from single source of energy to distributed. Far more consumer endpoints that are not necessarily under the utility's control. Privacy is a huge issue about who owns the data, more vulnerability. Think of Stuxnet, where everybody's, they were running the centrifuges fast, but the SCADA system that was actually showing the centrifuges said they were all fine. The data was manipulated. And we've got this grid coming, some might say already here, that is many players, far more complex, way many more interfaces to the edge, a lot more connectivity both ways going that, automation and AI will start making some of the decisions. So we have a concern about there. Thankfully, there's a NIST working group and other industry partners on this, but it's going to be a very complex set of targets. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, David, for that. The way we're running the meeting is, note your questions and comments, and then at the end we have this wide open session where essentially anybody, though we've sort of seeded it with a number of folks online, can ask and comment further. Next up, Dustin Loup should be joining us remotely from, I think, from Washington, D.C. Dustin, are you there?
Yes, I am. Am I coming through on your end?
Very well, thanks. Dustin, over to you. So we're very pleased to have you virtually here. You're missing a slight flurries here in central New York, but we'll catch up some other time. So Dustin, without further ado, great to have you with us from the Internet Society. And please introduce yourself a little bit further, just so I know you well, you know me, but I'm not sure everybody else here in the room does. Thanks.
Sure thing. Thanks, Lee. And sorry I can't be there with you in person to enjoy the snow. We haven't got to enjoy much of that down here in the DC area. But hopefully we'll make it up there for a future meeting. But I won't take up too much time because I know you have important things to cover. But I'm Dustin Loup. I am the co-chair of the IGF USA, or the Internet Governance Forum USA, and also the executive director of the Greater Washington DC chapter of the Internet Society, along with a few other hats in the world of internet governance and internet policy. Really what I want to accomplish in talking to you all today is to raise a little bit more awareness about the IGF USA. It seems like from what I've seen that you all are doing a lot of great work in the smart city realm, and there's a lot of overlap with the issues that we care about. And because we are a multi-stakeholder community-driven initiative, we want to establish some relationships and build communities across the U.S. With different groups that are focusing on these issues so that we can have a broad, multi-stakeholder, multidisciplinary, and geographically diverse input to our process and our deliberations. So before I kind of talk about where we are focused as a group and how you can contribute, I wanted to provide a little bit of context for what the Internet Governance Forum USA is and the ecosystem around it. I know that Lee has been active in the IGF USA, and I saw Garland McCoy on the call as well. And so we've had good contributions from Syracuse and that area, but would love to have even more engagement this year and moving forward, and maybe even having some sort of IGF USA community forum or on the road event up in New York sometime. So you can see here I've already described what the IGF USA is, and if you could go to the next slide, I can kind of provide a little bit more about the IGF ecosystem. So basically, the Internet Governance Forum at a global level is a place where different stakeholder groups from around the world come together to discuss different policy issues around the internet and how it's governed. Ultimately, the purpose it serves is to exchange ideas and best practices rather than negotiated or binding outcomes. And this is particularly useful in my experience as a way to bring people together to have discussions that they wouldn't otherwise have if it was more focused on direct policy deliverables. And at these convenings, the discussions often lead to determining where a particular issue area can and should be covered, and then that work is taken forward by groups that participate in these internet governance forums. So it is based, and it receives its mandate from the United Nations World Summit on the Information Society, and it got its mandate back in 2005 and was renewed for another 10 years in 2015. But one of the really cool things that has come out of this process was the independent and organic growth of these national and regional IGF initiatives, such as the IGF USA. And these operate kind of outside of the centralized IGF and have their own independently designed processes for engaging stakeholders and holding events. But we do collaborate with other national and regional IGFs and discuss together globally when throughout the year, and at the conference we share our experiences and provide case studies and try to get a better sense of how we can coordinate globally. So if you go to the next slide, there are each year the IGF defines themes that will be the focus of its work. For 2020, they're focused on 4 broad topics, which include data. What more specifically is focused on data governance, trust, which would be more specifically like cybersecurity and things like platform responsibility and ethics around emerging technologies, stuff like that. There's the inclusion track, which will focus on things like access, accessibility, digital literacy, and that digital equity stack where capacity development comes into play. And then late in the game, they added, based on community input, a track for environmental sustainability and the roles that ICTs play in climate change and how smart cities fits into all of this. I think there's a lot of overlap and opportunities to engage with the global IGF within your community, and their call for sessions will actually be released in a week or 2 here. So if that might be an interesting way to collaborate, and I'm happy to provide more context on that if there's any interest. So go to the next slide. The IGF USA this year will be held, and sorry about the small text on the slide. This year's conference will be held in the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. on July 24th. And it's a full day event where we have 8 sessions and topics that were specifically focused on that involve big plenary discussions and breakouts. And we take these and, like I've previously mentioned, not only, distribute our outcomes within the community here in the US, but also share our discussions among a broader global community of other national and regional IGFs and other stakeholders as well when we go to the IGF this year, which is scheduled to be held in Poland in November. So if you go to the next slide, I can get to the kind of heart of where we are focused this year. And this is actually a good time to be talking with you today, because I just this morning was able to finalize our survey, which will, I'm actually going to share it with you before I share it with anybody else, so that you can help us figure out where we should be focusing our energy this year. But ultimately, we have identified 11 topics through community input, and those are, as you see here, data governance, which is inextricably linked to privacy legislation and that broader discussion. But we also want to take a deeper look at the way we're thinking about data and identity and human rights impact. And, you know, I know that there's a lot of interest in that when you're thinking about smart cities. We're also looking at security of internet infrastructure and the interplay between the companies that provide that infrastructure and the end users, and how there can be broader collaboration in the community in dealing with threats. We're thinking about focusing on encryption and how we can protect that encryption and the you know, privacy and security that relies on that, while also addressing the increasing concerns and that are being voiced by law enforcement about different safety issues online. That we're focusing on inclusion and the role that plays in access, education, and economic opportunity. This year we'll be focusing on, well, we may be focusing on the digital dynamics of elections, everything from mis and disinformation to security around voter rolls and voter machines to faulty apps and primaries. We'll also be potentially be looking at artificial intelligence and how we should be thinking about that in the, you know, the future of AI in the context of the great expectations and fears that are circulating, and how different policies, whether it's privacy, intellectual property, data governance, or more, how that affects the development of AI. Also, we're looking at IoT and 5G and how to balance the winning of the so-called race to 5G and IoT with the ethical and security concerns around the technology, and also, you know, the economic promise of that. Then we're looking at antitrust and big tech, and how we should be looking at antitrust in the world of big tech, and whether or not the consumer welfare standard will be sufficient, or if we need to bring in some things like consumer protection and privacy concerns that we are increasingly seeing in the discussion around this. Then we're also looking at digital innovation and disruption. What happens when peer services made possible by the internet disrupt traditional companies and industries, and how we should be responding to that. And then a broader discussion about the state of internet governance institutions and kind of who makes the rules, and if our modern internet governance institutions are up to the task. And I know that we're on a tight timeline here, so I just wanted to provide that context and just what we're trying to do here with this survey that I'll share with you. I just posted it into the chat. Is we are taking these 11 topics and trying to narrow them down to 8 topics, and then we will build panel teams which are open for anybody to contribute to. And Lee and I worked on an artificial intelligence one last year, and hopefully we'll find ways to work together with Syracuse again this year to develop some of these discussions as it relates to the work that you all are doing up there. And so if you fill out the survey, it would be greatly appreciated. And there's also an option to provide your name and email if you're not currently part of the process, and I will reach out to you with more information about ways to get involved. And then lastly, really quick, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Internet Society, because there's also a lot of overlap there, and we have a global network of chapters. As I mentioned, I run the chapter in the greater Washington, D.C. area. There's also a chapter in New York City as well, and others throughout the US and the world. And that is a great way to, I know for the DC chapter, we don't have a geographical requirement to be a member and to participate in our work. So that's a way to engage. And then the, this network and the, Internet Society headquarters has a action plan where they're really focusing their energy this year on, I won't go through all of these because I know we're short on time, but basically what they're trying to do is build, promote, and defend the internet by growing it through the use of community networks and IXPs, and making it stronger with the use of open standards and the different security elements like strengthening and extending encryption and securing global routing. And they also have done some great work over the past several years in IoT security, and they have a kind of collaborative platform for that work. And so that's all worth looking into as well. And I'm happy to answer any questions about this later or find time to chat with anybody that is interested in any of this at a later time.
Great. Thanks so much, Dustin. Appreciate it. I should have mentioned this before, but we were greatly appreciative of the internet live streaming of this meeting by the Internet Society, which was, so this is actually going out worldwide, thanks to Jolie McPhee in particular of Internet Society. We've been, as mentioned before, collaborating with Syracuse University has been collaborating with the Internet Society, the UN Internet Governance Forum, the Internet Governance Forum USA since before the beginning. And we look forward to continuing that collaboration going forward. Dustin, we're going to sort of keep with the sort of general theme and hold questions for the open session at the end, which is fast approaching, and turn to our next speaker, Cully Patch, who is designated by his boss, Joe Caroli, to speak on behalf of the Quanterion Solutions about cybersecurity innovation systems analysis. Please, Cully.
Thank you very much, Lee. As Lee said, I'm Cully Patch from Quanterion Solutions Incorporated down in Utica, New York. And we are a community-based, what we call an information analysis center company that has been working in this community for quite a while, about to celebrate our 20th anniversary. And so what I wanted to get into is exactly that. We currently hold 2 contracts with the Department of Defense for the information analysis systems for the Cybersecurity and Information Analysis Center, which is on the left there, the Homeland Defense and Security Information Analysis Center, and we may be competing in the future for all 3. So just to show you that we have a background in this and we've been working with this a long time. And if you don't remember anything else, it's very much a community-oriented things with based on a technical information standard. So under the Department of Defense's Information Analysis Centers, the main 3 things they want us to look at, obviously, is eliminate redundancy, foster collaboration, and stimulate innovation. And of course, those are the big words to kind of, when all said and done, we want to make sure we're going back to those things. 2 ways we do it is through the research and analysis services, as well as agile and scalable contracting. And that the idea of that is, of course, to try to do things much quicker, fail fast, use different vehicles to get things on contract faster, but all in order to be able to develop capabilities for the Department of Defense. All right. So the DODEX are actually broken down. They actually were broken down into several IX over many years. And over the years, they have actually gotten down to just 3 IX. But under those 3 IX, we have 22 what we call technical focus areas. So under the CSIAC is the more of the cybersecurity, modeling and sim, knowledge management, and software intensive systems, software assurance type things that we come to you guys to talk to today. And also I've been speaking with Lee over a couple months period in the interest of the smart cities, because we're getting ready to do a workshop down in DC on the 24th of March. And he has been helpful to introduce us to a lot of the folks in the community so we can invite them to, which is the ultimate goal, is to help inform smart-based development. As you know, as not only as many cities to include Syracuse around the world are trying to develop smart technologies and initiatives, but the Department of Defense is also trying to integrate those into the bases as well. And so we're going to be able to come together, and that's what we do really, is we bring people from academia, industry, and government to solve hard problems. So that's how it's all split out. We've got our overall director down in the Defense Technical Information Center in Virginia, Mr. Tom Gillespie. That's overall that, and we as contractors run the actual centers. All right. Oh, sorry. So the overall goal, of course, like I said, bringing the folks together from all aspects, and that's the part of the community part that's very important. And part I've actually taken a great interest in, not only from the Department of Defense, the industry and academia, but also the local community, as we are here, the local community, Syracuse and in Utica. So we are, as far as the overall mission, it's to develop and to kind of curate this, what we call scientific technical information. And it started about 70 years ago when things started to get technical in like the nuclear realms. And they had to find a way to take a lot of this technical information and be able to make sure that they're storing it so that it could be reused, not develop another program that did the same thing we did 5 years ago. So we can leverage that back to the eliminate redundancy, but also to be able to take that just like a thesis would, and you take that and move upward from there and to help solve problems. So very important. We do a lot of STI gathering. If it's been sponsored by the government at all, we help gather that information, bring it into the databases so it can be accessed by the public. And we also, in that part of that though, and that's the overall goal, is we actually do a lot of other things that are very catalytic in nature. And one of them being I'll mention the skin in the game workshop straight away, because that's kind of what I was getting at with the smart base workshop. The skin in the game workshop is the idea is you take the practitioners that are working these actual problems, and not just a bunch of techies and a bunch of leadership or separately. The idea is to bring everybody from multiple aspects of the problem set, to include everybody from power providers to the network providers, the network integrators, to the leadership that's actually having to implement all this stuff. And each one of them has a unique and wonderful perspective and what I call a diversity of depth. And so we try to get those folks in the room, and then we remove all the sharp objects and run through a series of workshop type scenarios, facilitated exercises, tabletop exercises to help go towards a particular goal. And as I talked about, our smart base workshop is going toward how we can best inform the development of smart bases, and how we're obviously inviting many people from the smart cities experts so that they can exchange that information. And it's key because not only can you exchange your perspectives, but you can network in those areas, you can find out things lessons learned, things that work, maybe things aren't working, and it ends up saving a lot of money. Rather than developing these things in a cylinder, try to get folks together as a community and get it done. And so a lot of these things toward the end, webinars, podcasts, we'll get into them a little bit. The SME network is huge because as an IAC, we answer questions about every technical thing we possibly could. We actually can, under our contract, we can devote 4 hours to answering any technical question that comes into our site. And but sometimes we have a great deal of expertise around us, but sometimes because of the broadness of the technical diversity, we don't. And so we rely on our subject matter expert network to be able to call on to answer those questions, and sometimes also be involved in actual tasks that could be done, customer funded tasks. So that's the big long one in the beginning. But basically that's what we're coming down to, is bringing people together, multiple diversity, so work through certain problems, kind of like you are here today, and develop something real. All right. So these two here, we are basically broken down into a DTIC funded and a customer funded type tasks. The DTIC funded task is what we call our basic center of operations. It is what we're funded to do through the contract, the main contract, to provide services, technical inquiries, like I talked about, literature searches. We also do our webinars and podcasts are held under that part, our quarterly journals, and we do those things. But all these things can't be done just by us, and that's where the community comes in. That's where the subject matter experts come in. That's where people that know these things contribute to all these products. And so I do a lot of talking to folks to be able to bring together the folks to help with these products, but most importantly, to help solve your problems. But we also have, and this is a neat part of the way the government contract was set up, it's an IDIQ, or indefinite quantity, indefinite delivery option, where if we have a small task that a outside customer says, hey, I've got a certain amount of money, but I need somebody to kind of study something for a year, or I need some particular software built for a year, or I need some prototype built for a year, which going back to that failing fast type of idea. So then we can work with DTIC, and through the it's rather rapid task added on to that contract. It's supposed to be within about 2 months to add that cast to our contract, and we bring in our subject matter experts, perhaps others from our subcontractors, of which Syracuse is one, to work on those projects. They're up to a year, up to $1 million for those particular what we call core analysis tasks. But the overall idea behind it is to go back is to have those abilities, the agile abilities, to be able to solve problems, and that's rather than spending a year and a half trying to get something on contract. We can put money down on things, get it on the contract, and get what people need. So, how we doing? Okay. So this is an overall slide built by the DoD IX to kind of show the overall IX model. Up in the upper left corner here is the S&T management community. This overall folks that, they're managed by Department of Defense instruction on down for law to actually develop and store and be able to reuse this scientific technical information. Then over to the right is the laboratory community. Obviously, they work on a lot of new technologies to turn into capabilities. And then at the bottom is the actual operational community that's using them. And then over here on the bottom left is the acquisition community. So those four there actually have all their different jobs to do, right? The operations community is the one that actually has to go do and protect us and use the capabilities that have been delivered. But not without the S&TI community develop the scientific technical information, the laboratories to develop it, the actual technology, and the acquisition communities to actually build the things, to build the capabilities, you wouldn't be able to do that. But obviously, with that becomes a certain amount of how do we get these all the folks working together to be able to build those capabilities. And that's exactly what IX do. They're that collaborative, they're that catalyst to be able to get together and through these different things I discussed earlier to help turn those ideas, because maybe STI is just a simple white paper, but it takes a long thing to go from a white paper to actual capability that could help protect us. And that's what we try to do, is we try to be that catalyst to try to bring the right people together, diversity to depth, and make that stuff happen. So I'll go a little faster so I'm kind of front-loaded the presentation. But as you can see here, we actually do quarterly journals for each one of our IX and their particular technical focus areas. And so we're always looking for folks that would like to publish in those particular technical focus areas. We do them once a quarter, and they're available online on our website and published. So you can actually see them, see if it's something that you would like to do, and maybe contribute. Because that's what it comes down to, is these things start as, like I said, white papers. Well, sometimes they start as journal articles. People start kicking them around and saying, well, I don't know about that and this and that. And then we maybe get in a workshop and really kick through the problem. And then finally get to that part where maybe it can go to the acquisition community, be built for the operation community, so we can actually do something with it. On our site as well, you'll see a series of webinars. We do a webinar once a month. We also bring in subject matter experts to do these webinars. If you would like to be able to share your knowledge on particular subject matter, we'd love to have you, and we will bring you in, and you'll do it's basically a 1 hour webinar. And it really not only helps us, but more importantly, it helps the community. That's the same thing with these podcasts. We try to do occasional podcasts that have maybe specific technical focus on something. We're also trying to do maybe a little series of things. Dr. Fawcett is helping us out with a series on C++, and we're about to publish. And so it basically has to do with that technical focus area, because you never know where that'll go. That idea will go to help that capability. These are digests. What we do is we try to digest over a 2-week period what subject areas, for instance, the cybersecurity digest. We'll look at all the things that have to do with cybersecurity, kind of digest them down and present them in this, and you can subscribe to it. So kind of like a Reader's Digest to help you with your time. This, of course, we talked a lot about already. This is the Smart Base workshop that we're having in the 24th to 25th March in Virginia. This is a letter of endorsement by Central Command, noting the fact that we really need to get our hands around this, just like David was talking about at the state level, is to be able to figure out how we're going to do this at a base level, and that's what we're getting after. All right, so there's the takeaways. And the idea is that, again, back to the eliminate redundancy, foster collaboration, and stimulate innovation. I know those are kind of big words, but sometimes you need some big words to just kind of come back to keep yourself sane. We in our VCO product, we do the deep STI collection, we do training products, workshops, and other things, and outreach such as this, so that we can bring people together to solve those problems. And bottom line is to be able to leverage that information, that scientific, technological information that can be converted eventually into a capability that can protect us all. So with that, I will let you go, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Cully, for that. And again, we're moving right along, and we'll take questions at the end. We're going to go very quickly here because we're running a little behind schedule, and we always promise to end on time and under budget. So just I'll go real quickly. We recognize smart cities. When you say that, it's a big word. It's all kinds of different technologies, concepts, ideas being thrown around. It has a lot to do with the Internet of Things. Next slide. But so there's many different aspects, whether it's the economy, people, the governance structures. We also were hearing Dustin talk a lot about data governance and internet governance, mobility. We also, Dave Adkins from NYSERDA was discussing all the tie-ins there for energy and mobility, the environment, living circumstances, security quality. The real issue here for the work we've been doing in the Secure Cloud Architecture Action Cluster is what we want to be smart by design for all of this, to be thinking about all of these concepts and the people and the city we live in inclusively. Next slide. So the work here, again, just to be really quick, has been done over time by many, many people. More than are on this slide that are being credited. Several of them are here in the room. You've met some. You're going to meet more a little bit later to bring us together towards an inclusive architecture and framework. The version 0.7 was published last July. Version 0.8 is released today with a typo on the cover page to be corrected, but still it'll be released today as 0.8, which now is a chapter in this next guidebook, which will be discussed a little bit later. Next slide. So what ties all of these different aspects together? In this one complex chart, we try to pull a lot of it together. We're talking about security from cloud to edge for smart cities, but also for all the different components of a smart city. And this is particularly focuses in tying back to the energy grid. But if we start to the left, we have the privacy concerns first and foremost, as Yusuf highlighted previously, availability of services, because again, if you can't access any of this, it doesn't matter. Concepts from NIST standards called separation of duties, meaning if you should not have access to that data, you should not have access to that data, and it should be built into the design that there is those kind of levels of controls. One aspect of this is called the least privilege, meaning, no offense to all of us in the room or online, we should all have the least privileges associated with us as possible, so we can't go roaming around systems willy-nilly, as all kinds of badly architected systems permit people to do. And I see Dave in the back saying, yeah, that's what we got to do all the time. So now part of that goes along with ensuring stronger data confidentiality if we're building the systems properly. That may tie in, and usually does, to encrypting data at rest and in transit. Okay, so that's the upper left. To the right, we're talking quickly about data classification, because if we don't understand what types of data it is or what the different types of risks are, and that's a lot of the architecture, then we can't do very well if it's all that big confusing word jumble for poor Sam Edelstein of the city to make sense of. It's tough. So we get towards classifying data by levels of risk in the architecture, red data being sensitive information of some sort, yellow data having some level of controls that required, and green data being open civic data that Sam wishes all of our students here would take and analyze and help them out with, make sense of. Okay, so going to the next part. So just that summarizes, well, I'll just go back to the prior slide real quick. At the high level, what Dave was talking about for the energy grid, and tying it back to DoD concerns, whether it's a smart base, it's a smart city, it's the nation, there's a lot of cyber physical risk and resilience needed to ensure any nation is safe and secure. And with the growing complexity, new technologies such as blockchain, which a certain student will introduce further into the conversation a little bit later, ties in. Our lower left corner suggests a small, simple demonstration project tying many of these concepts together with a local micro hydro, tiny little waterfall that powers a particular park, county park, where we could actually implement these grand ideas on small scale with systems that students also play with and learn from. And as I say, no matter what, no one dies if the lights don't go on in the bathroom or the hand dryers and don't work for this little micro hydro unit. So it's kind of safe for student experimentation versus messing with the big centralized grid of the past. Next slide. Okay, so the key takeaways from the architecture is 3 words: red, yellow, green. And oh yeah, back up your red data. If you're a smart city manager, or if you're a school teacher, or if you're running a business, or whatever you're doing. Now, of course, it gets a little more complicated. My one footnote is the NSA came out with recommendations for secure cloud practices a few weeks ago. And you know what? They're pretty much the same as ours. They don't call it red, yellow, and green data, but they're saying pretty much the same thing. So we've really essentially following best practices from NIST or the government or any big business active in the cloud. We're trying to make it simple and understandable for city managers, and with a little further research from people here in the room and the students here in the room to confirm that this new approach can actually work in practice, and we'll be taking that forward. Next slide. Okay, so summarize. If you don't have a secure cloud architecture and you're in the smart city space, you're not that smart. Next slide. And now we'll turn it to Catherine. Catherine, are you there with us? Professor Lasky, can you hear us? She can't turn it on, or she's having... Okay, should we change the order? And oh, she is coming in? Hey, Catherine, if you can manage to get on soon, we'll stand by. And if you can't, we'll change the order and we'll come circle back to you in just a little bit. Okay. All right. So we will switch orders, and we're sort of almost like as if we were on schedule. Scott, can you pop down to Scott Towsley, the next presentation? No, but you want to switch the slides. Okay. Scott, are you there with us? That's the nature of doing live multi-session, multi-location events. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, Catherine,
Can
great.
you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Sorry.
No problem.
Finally turned it on a different device.
Very good. Okay, so we're back
yeah,
on.
Scott, I had the same problem. Try putting on, if you have headphones, put them on. It wouldn't work for the device that I had. Okay, so thanks everybody. It's been a really fascinating webinar so far. My name's Kathy Lasky, and I'm a professor in the Systems Engineering and Operations Research Department at George Mason University, and I'm the director of our new Transdisciplinary Center for Resilient and Sustainable Communities. And Lee has asked me, oh, sorry about the date on this. This is not October 28th. Lee has asked me to tell you a little bit about our center, and I will kind of also touch on how it relates to smart cities. Go ahead, next slide, please. And I'll try to go quickly. So our center started with basically the realization that in today's world there's climate-driven natural hazards, there's forcing pressures for migration, and world conflicts forcing pressures for migration creates challenges for communities, but also these infrastructure dependencies, which are becoming greater with smart cities and internet connection, connectivity of everything, creates pressures on communities and opportunities for really exciting opportunities, but also concerns about resilience. And so we bid in a university competition to set up transdisciplinary centers. We have members from 6 schools here at the university in our center. We have engineering, we have science, we have business, we have policy, we have conflict analysis and resolution, and health and human services. So we have faculty from all those different schools and a number of graduate students who are working together on resilience and sustainability initiatives. And these challenges are so serious that they require collaboration from multiple disciplines. Next slide, please. Do another build. I think this is no, go back then. Can you go back? Yeah, unfortunately, part of this is not displaying. No, next slide. Next slide. Sorry, the part of this is not displaying. This was a what is resilience, and there are several definitions for resilience. And let me just move here to, I think you're a little out of sync with me, but that's okay. This chart has provided kind of a unifying conversational, both conversation and modeling paradigm for thinking about resilience. So the chart is based on the research of Pantelli at University of Manchester. The idea of resilience. There's supposed to be a build for this. Would you try it and see if anything new appears when you build? Would you try moving one slide forward? Yeah, there we are. All right, no, that's right. Perfect. We call this the resilience quadrilateral. It was a resilience trapezoid previously, and we look at the, so if you look at you think of a system that has a pre-disturbance state and it has some level of functioning, and then some kind of disturbance happens, and that's what we're looking at resilience as, the ability to withstand and recover from some kind of disturbance. So in phase one, there's a disturbance and it reduces the functioning of the system. And then in phase two, there's a degraded state post disturbance. And then in phase three, the system restores itself and to some level of functioning. And on the we consider the trapezoid we consider, or the quadrilateral, we consider three different cases where in a poor resilience case, it comes back to functioning less than it was before. In a in kind of a traditional idea of resilience as bouncing back to where you were before, it restores its original functioning. Or we like to talk about bounce forward resilience. We would like to design systems that can not only absorb a challenge, but bounce back to better than they were before. And so the symbols at the bottom, we look at how fast is the decline, how low it drops, what's the extent of the downtime, how promptly it recovers, how long it takes to get better, and how much better is the end state. And different resilience to different kinds of shocks and resilience of different kinds of systems, you need to come up with ways of measuring these. And so in a power grid, you're looking at who has power and how much of the power has been restored. And but there are other issues like for water, for food, and whatever you're looking at restoring, you need to find a way to measure the functioning and measure how well it bounces back or bounces forward better. Next slide, please. So we are just getting started. The center began officially in September, or I guess October of 2019. So we're just getting off the ground. We have a few projects which I'll talk about in a moment. We're aiming to build a transdisciplinary research and teaching capacity, build a multi-scale research methodology, support community-led, bottom-up, locally focused initiatives. The key idea there is that you have to work with the local community, and that can be a challenge because there are different local communities, and there are different competing tensions within a local community. And so that's part of the reason that this is inherently transdisciplinary. But you need to work with it rather than going in and telling other people what they should do. You need to understand the problems of the community that you're working with, and then also provide evidence-based ongoing evaluation and support. And so the slogan there is that we have to listen to the community, learn from the community in order to create lasting effects. Next slide, please. Build one more. Build one more. I'm sorry I didn't remove the builds from these. I didn't realize there were builds. The wheel here considers a group of different infrastructures that have to be addressed when a shock hits a community. Energy storage, shelter, water, communications, agriculture and food security, health and nutrition. And these are all these different infrastructures. They're arrayed there in a wheel, but they interact with each other. And we need to consider the interactions among these different infrastructures. And this can be supported by one of our major activities is a knowledge sharing network called Star Tides, which it's got a few thousand nodes worldwide and is a knowledge sharing network of technologies for disaster resilience. And next slide. So our implementation methodology is multi-scale. We begin with identifying a regional need and then going to a local community, working with the local community to develop local solutions, integrate the technologies and deliver the capabilities, adjust, and then iterate. And each of our projects is locally tailored, but we are seeking to identify commonalities that can be built across projects. Next slide. So each year we have each year we do a StarTides annual technical demo. So our Lynn Wells, who could not be here today because it's in the middle of the night and he's in Japan. Dr. Linton Wells is the executive advisor to the Center for Resilient and Sustainable Communities. And he has been spearheading for the past, I think it's 18 years, the StarTides network of knowledge sharing for humanitarian assistance and disaster relief technologies. And we do an annual technical demo every year. For the last 3 years, it's been at George Mason University. That's how I met Lee. He came down to the StarTides demo last October, and it'll be occurring again next October. And the photo there is a picture of some of the technologies that were demonstrated there. For example, an inflatable satellite dish and some portable solar panels that can be brought to a disaster area to improve communications and provide electrical power. And then there are several other studies and projects that we are working on. It's not an exhaustive list of the things we're working on, but let me just move then to the next page, please. And so in summary, our aim is to create new knowledge and enable new collaborations through building replicable models that combine qualitative with quantitative models, so narrative and storytelling to bring in the perspectives of the individual community, with quantitative engineering models and computer simulations to analyze and improve resilience in communities. And I think that's, I'll stop now. Thank you, everybody, and apologize for all of the technical difficulties.
No, Catherine, thanks so much for that. Really exciting what you're building there, and we at Syracuse University look forward to many more opportunities for collaboration. On one of her slides, Kathy mentioned a joint proposal we're working on right now for accelerating resiliency in a response network nationwide. That'll be going in a few weeks, so we have our fingers crossed that we'll be able to build on that in future. Without further ado, we're going to try again to get Scott Tousley from Splunk in remotely. Scott, are you out there? Scott, can you hear us? Can you speak to us? What about Len? You do see Scott online?
Yeah,
Scott, we can't hear you. Are you trying to speak to us? Oh, he's saying he's on the phone? Okay, so we're going to jump to, oh, he's joining, he's dialing in. Got it. Well, I can do the preamble. Scott Tousley is a senior executive with Splunk. He was previously with Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology, and co-chaired and had built out the Cybersecurity Privacy Advisory Committee, which he still co-chaired. Well, he first helped working with from DHS with NIST to build out the broader Global City Team Challenge, which has been looking at issues for smart cities across all critical infrastructure sectors. And he also co-chairs the Cybersecurity Privacy Advisory Committee still today, even while going into the private sector with Lan Jensen, which has produced this CPAC Guidebook. How we doing?
Not trying to please phone. They're not trying to get into phone. Try to reach for him.
Scott, can you hear us?
This is not working. Yes, he can hear us.
But we can't hear him. Well, I'll do another commercial for the guidebook while we're sorting this out. As opposed to many, say on the front prior slide, as opposed to just sort of laying out cybersecurity risks and talking about privacy, Scott, we have to give him a lot of credit. Scott, we hear noise. Is that you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Great. Perfect timing. I was just getting done with saying all kinds of nice things about you.
I have no idea why none of this has worked for the last 30 minutes. It's frustrating from the listener's end, I can tell you that.
Okay.
All right, let me go off of this slide. I'm assuming Sakwu is not dialed in.
Yeah, you're up.
All right, I will go through this briefly and sort of summarize things. I'm in a bit of a noisy place, and I'm now backed up against a hard stop at 11:30 that I had that I'm trying to adjust.
Okay. Well,
the bottom line is we put this guidebook together over most of 2018, early 2019. And what we ended up using to put the guidebook of what we thought would be useful best practices, recommendations on how to do things, lessons learned from a lot of different city and community efforts. We essentially went back to the NIST risk management framework as sort of the basic reference that we used, and sort of put together a somewhat simplified version of that structured what was put into the guidebook. We're looking at ways to sort of update it, but in the interim, NIST is looking at the guidebook and looking at how to adapt it into a NIST formal document, and we're in the middle of some of that editorial work as we speak. We think the guidebook is pretty solid. It has good recommendations on how to do things. It's being used by a number of smaller cities and communities to look at how to handle the different perspectives of risk in smart city environments and challenges as they go through them. A couple of comments from Scott Tousley's perspective is that this is going to be a continuously it's going to be an ongoing update and revision challenge like any living document in a highly dynamic field, which is the smart city world, obviously. Coming to Splunk, it's clear to me that industry and government organizations are really not anywhere close to settling on agreement on data models, which is one of the foundational elements to doing smart city work anywhere. I also think we still face a lot of challenges in making governance processes and systems work in inherently cross-enterprise environments where you've got city and community organizations, you've got formal parts of the government, you've got nonprofits, you've got multiple industries and companies trying to help. And so the governance challenges, I think, are going to turn out to be perhaps the most significant friction in all of this system. NIST is a standards developing and standards initiating and standards growing sort of organization. It's going to be a bit of a challenge also to see whether the standards approach to things is going to be fluid and dynamic enough to keep up with things that go on. In a sense, the desire and the need to have smart city efforts be as open and inclusive as possible. Reality is that adds a lot of friction to the system, and it takes a lot of time and energy to work through some of these differences in perspective on how to do things. And so you have to be ready for the long haul to work through an inclusive and collaborative sort of effort. Can you go to the next slide? Here you can see some of the things that are in the structure that we put together. Again, it's designed, intended as a useful tool to help cities that are relatively new to this or don't have a sophisticated system already set up to sort of put all this together. We did a lot more work on the cybersecurity part of it, some, but not as much as I think needs to be done on the flip side, which is the privacy issues. And obviously that is also very, very fluid. And there are some good use cases in there from cities and organizations that both use systems like what we laid out in the guidebook and their own approach to using the guidebook for some of the things that they did. Can you go to the next slide? None of these recommendations are all that surprising. The underlying communications, infrastructure, service provider, however city or communities do that, is a very important part of the system because almost everything anchors to that. You can almost think of that as the data and information and governance bus for whatever else happens. And the documentation is also important because there's an awful lot of stuff that happens as you go through and work smart city efforts in your community. And sometimes we tend to forget lessons learned. We tend to lose the context about why something was set up the way that it was. Somebody moves on and goes to some other professional challenge and they have knowledge in their head about why things got done that sometimes can get lost. So documentation is very, very important in both an objective and a subjective sense. If you go to the next slide. And again, the second bullet is what I was trying to talk to a little bit earlier. The inherently distributed interests and parts of this seriously adds a lot of friction. You know, there's a reason that Apple has had a lot of commercial and public success because they essentially have driven their system and made people adapt to it. I'm not saying that's how smart cities should be. I'm just saying that the frictions of working things across the different lines of governance, across the different technical lines and angles to this, the different domains involved, don't underestimate the amount of friction and therefore the amount of focus and energy and push that it takes to make these sorts of efforts succeed. Next slide. And I think I will leave it there and turn it back over to you, Lee.
Thanks so much, Scott. Greatly appreciate it. And that's really, I think that's a landmark, a fantastic work you've done over the last couple of years to lead this effort. I can hear some of the weariness in your voice from the challenge of getting the coordination going. I think the next person up is probably exhausted too from trying to make things work collaboratively here in Syracuse. But we'll let you go. I know you're a really busy guy. Thanks so much, Scott.
Thank you.
So without further ado, Sam Edelstein, our Chief Data Officer for the City of Syracuse, co-chair of the Action Cluster and co-leading many initiatives here. Without further ado.
Thanks, Lee. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody online as well. So I'm here to talk about Syracuse Surge, which is our strategy for inclusive growth in the new economy, and talk about sort of the reasons why we're pursuing this and how we think about inclusivity as a part of it as well and why it's important. So you can go to the next slide. So we came to this strategy broadly because of an issue around access to services. So you can see on the screen here the map with the red and green colors on it. That's Syracuse, and all of the borders are census tracts around the city. And what we have highlighted are the census tracts in the city that tend to ask for services less than other census tracts around, which means that when we need to go and fill a pothole, the way that we do it now is that people will call and complain and say there's a pothole on our street. But we know that according to this map and others like it, there are certain parts of the city that complain more than others or request services more than others. And if we are relying exclusively on those complaints or those service requests, then it means that certain parts of the city will get less service than others, not because we want to give less service, but because we just don't know. One of the ways that that is really tangible is based on our street lights. So when a street light goes out, it means that it's dark on the street, can't see as well, you aren't getting the level of service that you're supposed to get. And again, we don't receive complaints or service requests from the city equitably. One of the ways to start to tackle that issue is to have a better understanding on what's working and what's not. And so the major project that we're working on right now is a $30-something million upgrade of all of our streetlights to LED, and connecting them all through sensors so that we know when they're on and when they're off, how much energy we're using, and we'll know then if they are off inappropriately. So you can see on the map with the little blue circles on it, those are all the streetlights that have been upgraded already. When you drive around almost the entire city now, there are new and upgraded streetlights. This is just very high level data, but we can start to look at where streetlights are on or off, and we'll start to build in better integration so that we know as soon as this thing goes off inappropriately or is on inappropriately, we can go and service it and ultimately provide better services. So when we think about sort of inclusive applications of technology, this is a reason why we need to deliver our services across the board in an inclusive manner, because otherwise we aren't doing our jobs as well as we should. Next slide. Another piece of it is, so access to education is really important too. We think that there is a huge opportunity for using technology and data in the future of our economy. We know, as all the things that we've talked about today, there's a ton of innovation happening, a lot of different things, whether it's from your coffee maker and being able to program it to large scale infrastructure. The use of data and technology will change the way that things work. It's only going to be as good, and our investment is only as good as having inclusive understanding about how that is accessible. And so building up the education to ensure that our students that are here, whether they're elementary school or high school or in college, that they are able to get training on real live applications of this kind of information is really critical. So one of the exciting things that we have been working on and was just announced that the governor is supportive of, and that there's budget behind it, is to build a regional STEAM school. So it's science, technology, education, arts, and math school at a existing but vacant, beautiful building downtown, the old Central Tech High School. That will be developed into a state-of-the-art school that will be for both city students and suburban students to come to, and to be able to work and learn about the future of where this technology and data could go. And we envision that using data that we're collecting from the city and passing it to students to be able to actually work and use can give them the opportunity to come and work for the city someday, or maybe to be able to go and work for other industries as well, but have on the ground and hands-on experience. What we're currently doing is working with students at the iSchool. We announced a partnership with Microsoft and the iSchool last fall, where we are giving students data that is okay to hand over and to give access to, where they're helping us to build dashboards and helping us to understand more about our day-to-day operations. And so we're really excited about where that can go and how that can help us to leap forward. But again, not just keeping it within the bubble of what we do on a day-to-day basis, but expanding the access and opportunity to people across the community is really critical. But we need to make good framework for decisions. And so I think the key thing that we've talked about a few different times here today, and sort of the overarching thing, is it's great that we can collect data. It's great that we can make all sorts of good understanding and decisions around things, and maybe we can predict where things will go wrong. But if we don't do it the right way, then it is potentially very, very non-inclusive and damaging and harmful to people. And so we, in this framework and this overall paper that we're working on, have proposed 4 different ways to look at types of technology as sort of a model for how would we both decide whether we should use the technology and collect the data, and then if we do, how we are sharing it and how we're protecting it, so that we can make sure that we're not doing something that is out of line of how our specific community feels about how things go. And so those 4 things, sorry, that got a little bit messed up with the formatting. Those 4 things are streetlights. So I talked about the streetlights and whether they're on or off. I think our interpretation, if we're thinking about, is this a surveillance technology? Is this something that's monitoring people? Streetlights are not. They, at least for the way that we're implementing them, and it's just telling us if they're on or off and how much energy they're using. It doesn't have anything to do with who's walking on the street, who lives around there, anything like that. It's just telling us whether it's on or off. So we wouldn't likely consider that surveillance technology. And so we would say, no, that's not in sort of a decision-making framework. For something like catch basin monitoring, where we're trying to understand is a catch basin, which are the things on the street that collect overflow water, if they're filled or not, that can help us to understand if the street is likely to flood, if we need to go and send someone out to go and fix the street. There's probably not anything that is related to surveillance there either, although maybe it has something to do with runoff of water somewhere that could have something to do with people. I don't think so. So again, probably okay for us to deploy that kind of information. Water metering frequency. We have a water department. We bill our residents to be able to understand how much water they've used so we can bill them. We collect that information once a quarter and bill people once a quarter. So that tells us if, how much water you've used. Problem is that if you've got a leaking toilet or a leak somewhere, your bill can be very, very high, and we really don't know about it until we've collected that information. So there's potential that we might want to collect it more frequently, and putting sensors and things like that on our water meters can be really useful. But to the point before about the level of information that you can get just by understanding how much energy is being used by something like a coffee maker, then you know, is the person home or not? What time do they wake up? Do they drink coffee? Are they drinking coffee at weird times of day? And that could suggest all sorts of things that as a city we might be interested in or not, but certainly other private companies could be interested in. So similar for water, when someone's taking a shower, the kind of water that they're using, when they're cooking, if they're home or not. And that's data that the city would collect. And if we're collecting at every single second of the day, we would have a really good picture on how you live your life. And so that is sort of the opposite of the continuum of not ever knowing really what's going on and, getting a huge bill because your toilet is leaking or knowing exactly when you use your toilet every single day. And so I think that then becomes a decision-making framework about what are we comfortable with collecting, what kind of information are we comfortable with the government having, and then even if we're all comfortable with the government having that information, how is it shared publicly or how is it protected so that nobody has access to it. And so those kind of decision-making tools are critical for us to make sure that we are inclusively deploying this kind of technology. And then the last one that we've talked about is facial recognition, which is certainly hot button and has been the news a lot in the last couple of days, especially. There's a company that has worked to figure out how to pair video streams and social media profiles together that got hacked. So that is scary and problematic. So I think, that facial recognition technology is something that the city government will have to contend with in one way, shape, or form. So having a good decision-making framework with good community partners like Civil Liberties Union is really critical for being able to understand what is right for our community specifically, where it may be just fine for another community around the country or around the world, but maybe not here, or vice versa. And so building that decision-making framework and then again understanding how do we deploy it. And this may be something that we say no to, even if it means that maybe it's a little bit more difficult for police to make an arrest or for whatever else to happen. Maybe that's the way that we do it. And so I'm not sure that I know how to make that decision, but I think being inclusive and having the right people around the table to help us get there is really critical. So when we think about smart cities and technology and inclusivity, that's where we go. So that's where I got.
Thanks so much, Sam, for that. It's exciting to see the progress being made in Syracuse. around smart cities and the framework. I'll note I'm going to be applying that tomorrow, also in an university senate meeting where we're talking about using that similarly for figuring out how to classify academic or university documents as well. So to close out, we're going to just about go into our open session in just a minute, but we come on up, Renee. So on Monday, in my blockchain management class, we have what we call a concept Shark Tank, where students present like new ideas they plan to work on this semester. And there were tremendous projects all around. One of them seemed so appropriate for this meeting. I said, okay, Renee, you go from the classroom to the world stage in 3 days. Go for it. Here you go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Renji. So I appreciate Professor Lee giving me the chance to present our project here. So what do my project topic is about like decentralized peer-to-peer solution for the microgrid area. Slide. So as it shows, microgrid is like a concept about like the small-scale power network that can use its own energy that resorts to power one or more small communities, which is often to like the concept of the mega grids. And with a lower cost of component cost, like a lot more families can generate their own powers through their own generators, like solar panels, wind turbines, or other renewable energy sources, instead of just simply rely on their national grid. And so there do exist a certain like a local energy market, which means there's a new opportunity that can this kind of market that we create a community that every member can trade their energy peer to peer and in a corporate manner. So before we have our system created, there are several different models we justified, which is like the centralized, which is mainly used among recent grid system, but it's still like a lack of the the advantage, some like a lack of the flexibility, and may cause some may have some like a issue of the single point failure. And also, like unstructured peer-to-peer model is also justified here, but it's lacking of the security. And so, after all, we decided to use the blockchain technology, which is, I think, a kind of good solution to have the transaction data stored in our blockchain network. So next. So we created, which is called the hierarchical trading system, based on the blockchain technology. The system can be like separated into 3 different layers, which is user, an agent, and a blockchain. Here's the basic function how this system is going to work. There will be several smart devices installed into different users for collecting their electricity information. Then the data will be encrypted and uploaded into the second layer, which is agent. And then the agent layer will decide like a specific transaction and pair with the 2 different parties and those transaction data will be recorded to the blockchain network, which to make it transparency and attractable. So next. So here is called the multi-agent system we created here in the agent level, which is very simple to increase the flexibility that each agent can respond to the different users independently, and the agent can be assigned to can take a different role based on its own different function. Like we have the low agent, distributed generation agent, and how there are grid agents associated with different associated with applications here. Those next. And in the blockchain layer, there will be called the Hyperledger Fabric and D3A, which are two type of the blockchain technology we will associate in the future with this system. And also there will be certain digital currency added to increase the system's credential and the transaction liquidity. Here is the conclusion. So with the increasing of the microgrid, so it's very necessary to building a complete microgrid trading platform and make it to protect the transaction and make them transparency and the traceability of information. And improving the flow rate of the information. Thank you.
Thanks, Renajay, for that. We're very pleased and to welcome back to Syracuse University, Mark Coleman, now Director of Advanced Energy with TRC, and with also still an adjunct professor here with Whitman School. Is Bree Cox also with us online? So you can hear it. Okay, so I'm going to leave it to Mark and Bree to sort of moderate our online and in the room discussion of everything that's happened so far. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Lee. And thank you, everybody online and also in the room, for your contributions today. I think what Lee and the team have assembled here is really a testament to the cross-section and interactive nature of both the problem set that folks laid out today, the sheer opportunity of what's going on here, but also the cross-functional expertise and multidisciplinary convergence that's required to bring this forward. So, Lee, tremendous agenda. Thank you for pulling all the expertise together in this room and online, and to see the momentum of this. I want to make a couple quick points as we get into this. One is I wear a couple hats, right? So most of you knew me in one role when I was Senior Director of Corporate Relations here at Syracuse University, but then transferred back into the industrial role last September, where I'm Director of Advanced Energy for TRC, which is an energy infrastructure consulting firm nationwide. But seeing it from both perspectives and being able to contribute to it in that capacity is really quite fascinating. And I'm grateful for that, Lee, for you keeping me in the loop here. But why I'm making that point is because the requirement for all of us to come together as a community, as Lee has set this forth with others around this network, really just demonstrates where this is going and the needs for us to all continue to collaborate, that no matter where we are. So to be able to see students who are bringing forth innovative solutions around blockchain and the future of that, and your presentation was excellent, and the manifestation of that, no matter where it goes, is an enormous contribution here. To see industry folks, who are bringing together the data, the science, the analytics, the convergence of that, government actors, David's presentation to outline where the state is coming together, this is as well as Sam's at a local, community level. This is a level of talent at this time in history that we need to converge on this. So again, grateful for everybody on this. Three things, stick out to me: predictive, preventive, proactive. The idea that we're manifesting this infrastructure in such a way that we need to have greater predictive capability. I think that came through in a lot of different presentations, points of view today. Preventive, the knowledge that we shouldn't create future challenges. If we can have the consciousness, in which we do, it's embodied in every presentation that was set forth here, and the clean action, the community action cluster action development group has had the wherewithal to think through some of the forward-looking challenges, the risk assessment that's required, the understanding that this coming together of technology and endpoints is creating both great dramatic opportunity for economic prosperity and future sustainability, but also presenting really profound challenges around safety and security and things that we need to address now. But the idea that we can get out in front of it, if we can envision the future, we can prevent the future challenges that can also require. That just requires our mindset and thinking to come together across these disciplines. Again, I think just a high point of the whole point around the action cluster, but the collective reasoning why we need to continue this effort going forward. and proactive. I think that gets to the sense of not just being predictive and preventive, but being thoughtful and mindful about innovative solutions like blockchain or other ways that technology can not just put a Band-Aid on the problem, but also perhaps envision the infrastructure and the opportunity in ways that we've never even thought of, that offers us the opportunity to really get out in front of it and really create the future for what it should be. Overlaying with that, I already said the words, but safety, security, and sustainability. You know, safety, public health, our wellness, our ability. It was referenced earlier today, the idea of people plus technology is really what we're talking about here. So it's not just the manifestation of the technical means by which we can make this new economy and new future come to life in a smart city context with all these great technologies coming together. We have to do so that's people-centric. So AI plus people plus distributed energy, people plus smart cities and this framework. The green, yellow, red of what Lee and the team and his students and everybody in this Action Collector has created is wonderful in the sense that it's simple and it envelops these elements of predictive, preventive, proactive, as well as safe, secure, and sustainable. So I wanted to give you that as just a framework, is my way of kind of distilling some of the conversation here this morning. I'm sure it's not perfect, but just a point of view around some of the things, the highlights that were discussed. And I think now is a good time for just some open exchange. I think if there's questions of folks that we didn't have time to get to during the open presentation that we want to put a finer point to, this is a great time in the next few minutes to do that. Yes, Lee.
Jeff DeLelio from VMware.
Yeah, so Jeff might have some prepared comments. Yeah.
Maybe he was handy to say something earlier.
Perfect,
So
thank you.
Start with
Thanks,
Jeff.
Lee. Let's do that. Jeff, if you're still online, if you don't mind weighing in, please.
These Breeze online, Dustin, and I basically made everybody so they can talk. I made Bree and Dustin, Garland, and anybody, Jeff, Kathy, and Marina. Like I made them visitors to talk online, so we can reach out to them and talk. But I don't know whether they're able to use.
Got it.
Okay.
Is Jeff's mic open?
Yeah, and they can hear you.
While we wait for Jeff, anybody from the room want to offer a reaction just to, around those points or your own version of some of the key takeaways today or questions while we're getting folks online brought in?
This is Garland McCoy. Can you all hear me?
We can, Garland. Yes. Thank you.
I was just very curious with Dave Adkins' comments. He sort of left it dangling with regard to the electric vehicles, EV stations, and sort of, he was hinting around at points during his presentation about the edge of the grid and the interconnectivity there, but particularly the cybersecurity issues involved, because the endpoint electricity is not the electricity meter. That the meter actually does virtually nothing. It just gathers information. It doesn't have any way of gating or governing, if you will, the provisioning of electricity. It's the end fan, computer, compressor, EV charger, whatever that is now coming into play, and is now for those people who are sort of focused on these things, of real concern with regard to the edge management of the grid of electricity between these DERs, as he said, that are sort of mini grids, mini micro generation storage entities, and that are now positioned at the edge, whether commercial or residential, and this complexity of the smart city and the integration of everything. So it's just very interesting that he mentions it, but then just sort of moves on. The issue of information too, personal information. The government in the hearings live in Washington are very focused now behind the scenes and even in the public hearings on the government's attempt to get information out of some of the utilities that's been not successful. So what to do about that? We haven't even touched the individuals' privacy of concerns in this area. So hoping it doesn't go the way that it did from the telephone, heavily regulated telephone system, where you had to have a court you had to go to the court to get permission to eavesdrop, to set up a wire. And now, of course, you're just basically wiretap 24/7, 365. I'm hoping personal information can go the same way when the business model starts to unfray for the electric utilities. Anyway, that's it for me. Yeah.
Okay. So did you have, well, I'll leave it for Dave to sort of comment there. Just
I think I have a quick summary, and that is, boy, it's all evolving. I mean, we've got the issue of what's behind the meter and the privacy that's there. We're building out private charging networks, sometimes municipal. There's one out there, charging networks. So I think a lot of that is going to be an ongoing dialogue, hopefully, between federal and regulations, between data privacy. But I like that you said I was hinting at it, because I don't know the answer. But I'll be interested to see where it goes, and that's, I think, part of the reason this group exists.
Well, I'd like to talk to you further about that, because as Lee and others know, I've got some thoughts about it and work with the committee on it. So
yeah,
we'll
definitely be following up now that we're virtually connected. I still wanted to get, since Jeff seemed very eager earlier in the session, I want to give him another chance. Jeff, are you out there?
Yeah, can you hear me now? Did I get?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
All right. Yeah. So this is my my intro to Blackboard. So I didn't see the mute button down on the bottom. I live in the world of Zoom. I wanted to say there were a couple. I appreciated the session today. I thought there was a lot of great information shared, and hearing from a lot of interesting subject areas. As I at VMware cover all of our public sector strategic programs, it's in touching emerging technologies. It's interesting to see some of the areas that the customers that I see, not only in the federal side but also on state and local side, are struggling with the same kind of issues that we're discussing here when they're looking to evaluate some of their what are we going to do on the IoT side? What are we going to do from an edge computing point of view? And as some know that, we spend a lot of money corporately, close to $2 billion a year, researching ideas that will help our customers kind of hit these areas and branching from edge. Blockchain, happy to hear about the blockchain, as Lee, we've got some offerings coming up in that area. But I wanted to point on a couple things that I thought it was Scott Towsley's conversation around documenting of the corporate knowledge, right? As folks are exiting and leaving state and local governments, making sure that the corporate knowledge is captured is critical as new folks come in and take over those jobs, and as folks come in and take over contracts from one vendor to another. It's a very, very important that the state and local governments put into their contracts the need for that documentation, so that it's from one system to another, so you're not losing time as you're doing that. That was a very good comment. And Sam, I thought when Sam was touching on the fact that education is very important, I was delighted. We have some efforts going on, working with some municipalities where we're trying to do things with the STEM programs to get the STEM students engaged, and also looking at local governments as an opportunity for employment, not discounting that as a place to go, because cities are starting to adopt, is what they would say, the cool technologies, right? Being able to do that. So I thought that was good. And then again, to your points, Mark, on the 3 points that you pulled away, I thought that was very insightful. So I appreciated and enjoyed the session today, Lee.
That's great. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Sure. Bree, and Bree, are you able to chime in here? I will say, having been in a number of these action cluster meetings, I think there's these common threads that continue to get elevated that are getting worked on. So while it's a challenge, it's also something that's getting worked on a daily basis. I know by the practitioners in the room across all sectors and as a collective whole. But at some point, I think we have to really spend quality time envisioning and this is an ethical, moral question in part, around privacy, what our expectation is as a society on what we're giving up and what we're not as citizens, but also as consumers, but also as engaged community members with the different hats that we wear for our livelihood. And what I mean by that is, if we think about the way that this technology is coming together, it's not a perfect world, and there may be aspects of things that we have to reconcile on what we actually allow others to access. But it offers some form of a value. That value can be freedom, that value can be greater sustainability, that value can be greater security, hopefully all of the above. But at some level, if we want access to a more robust, technologically enhanced, sustainable, safe, secure world, we may have to adjust our mindset on what it means to have personal data within our lives and what it means to be somewhat relinquishing of that data information to enable that world to actually happen. So there's that trade-off, right? But it's a conscious choice, and it's one that we need these protections. So while we wait for Bree and others to get connected here, I think there's these elemental things that continue to get dialogue around, and I think that's really the important thing is, what are those forums? So I know, Garland, you raised some excellent points, with regards to the industry engagement. And Jeff, what you just laid out on the continuity of knowledge that transcends different market sectors, and as people come in and out of roles and being able to capture that knowledge, there are these different groups that are out there that are already beginning, the Internet Forum is a great one. They're beginning to bring that together, or have been doing that for a long time. If you're active in those groups and there's ways that it lends support to this broader effort here, I think that's something that if you can continue to bring that knowledge back and also make other introductions into the action cluster, that helps us a great deal. At the end of the day, the weakest link, whether it's in security or in other aspects, that we want to think about, is the one that is maybe not having a voice at the table, the one that we haven't seen, the one we haven't heard from. So if there's other stakeholders that also should be engaged, we should be mindful of whom they are and what are the mechanisms by which they can be brought to this forum together. And then I'll look, in a selfish way at Syracuse, but in the sense that we need more of these leadership-based communities in New York State as well to stand up. And I think that's really what's illustrative in this room and with the folks on the call is a group that's fixated on a geography, but also a network of individuals that is committed to this, that wants to bring something forward and have it be the test bed, the innovation space, the place that solves for some of those privacy, moral, ethical concerns together, but then can cascade that out to the rest of the world. So in Lee's work and others in terms of it magnifying this to NIST and other federal agencies, but putting the spotlight on Syracuse as a mechanism by where some of the technology and some of the robust conversation dialogue can occur, that's happening here. I think this I do a lot of travel, as many know, and in and out of different communities who are doing work like this. And I'm very proud, both living upstate, but also being a part of the fabric of this dialogue and how it's been maturing here in the Syracuse area and within New York State, because I truly think and believe that we have become leaders. We are leaders, and we're showing that way. A lot of work to do, but in large part, thanks to everybody who's remained engaged in this at every level. Bree, is Bree able to?
Just ask anyone online. Yeah. Anyone else?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. I thought everyone was just talking over me. I was not unmuted on my computer, but I was unmuted on my phone, so I apologize for that. I thought everyone was just interrupting me. Hey, everyone. I cannot emphasize enough how terrifying I think that this has the potential to be terrifying and amusing in the same way that the ocean does. Just because there are so many unknown factors that we haven't foreseen and that we won't be able to foresee until we're kind of at the bridge, so to speak. So while I'm really excited to hear all of this, I'm just really hoping that we're able to emphasize the amount of compliance and ethics that needs to be attached to every single part of this process. And it's almost like each part of the process really needs to be engineered and re-engineered and reverse engineered until we get to the next step to make sure that ethics really are undercutting every single layer. Just because that is where, like you guys were saying, that is where, those terrifying things can really happen.
Thanks for that, Bree. Much appreciated. So we've had VMware and Amazon Web Services chiming in remotely, but that emphasis on ethics is very much to the point. Dustin, Loup, are you still out there? Or maybe not. Well,
I think.
Yeah. Dustin, maybe you could do a little summary of the discussions around AI from last year to this year at the Internet Governance Forum, and that would be a good way to sort of close out also in the context of the smart city discussions here, if that's all right for putting you on the spot.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think you might be able to speak to it better, given that you were up there on the panel. But really, what we're trying to look at is in the discussions we're trying to have at the IGF USA, whether we're talking about artificial intelligence or IoT and 5G and all of these things that have such great promise, is not ignoring these ethical implications, but trying to bring together the discussion and focus on the kind of realities of the fears. And so keeping the fears and the concerns in check, while also keeping the promise in check, because a lot of things can be overhyped, and with that overhyping comes a fear of missing out on the potential benefits of it, and that can often lead to rushing past the ethical and security concerns that I heard mentioned, and we do think those should be underlying a lot of the discussion. So it's bringing people together who have technical knowledge, who have that kind of ethical approach, and I think that the IGF USA is a great forum to have those discussions. So and we'll be doing much more of that this year.
Great. Thanks, Dustin. So this is kind of a good counterpoint, or it illustrates Mark's emphasis of the value of having this kind of multi-level dialogue, cross-sector dialogue. It was Sam Edelstein's discussion saying, okay, if you want us to help you think about like data classification, we want some help thinking about facial recognition. And I'm saying, okay. And then next thing, I'm talking to the Internet Governance Forum USA on a panel about governance of AI. And then I'm saying, you know what, there really should be such a thing as certified ethical AI machine learning developers. And so I said that out loud last year down at IGF USA on the stage. And a month later, I found on on YouTube, that Pew Internet had excerpted that little 2-minute segment when I talked about certified ethical AI developers and put it out. McKnight talks about this, and say, oh no, now I got to think about it. So for the last year, we've been discussing this further, also with back and forth, and are preparing for, again, to submit a NSF workshop proposal, because there is that gap. Ethics needs to be thought about. SAM needs help. Every industry needs help. Government needs help around all of this, and the communities need help. So we will be going forward in our academic capacity, but also working cross-sector for this. Professor Jeff Saltz, who leads up our data science program, isn't able to join us, but he's co-developed this workshop proposal with me that we'll be submitting shortly. Before we close, I just want to highlight some of our folks in the room that are helping us think about this and prepare for further research in the community to get feedback, because it's not just academics in the room that should be thinking about this. It should be members of the community. Reverend Gail Rena sitting here, Professor Danielle Smith, our students to the left here that have been working through the semester on, now once this meeting closes, I'm going to have them introduce them to Sam, because we have a draft survey and we're preparing to go into the community with, after getting the proper academic approval, for further research, both on inclusion and ethics and on the data privacy principles that have been discussed here. So not to run over, I was told we had to end by 2:15. So we'll say thanks so much to everyone online and in the room, to Skylar and Paul for making this meeting possible through their technical support and through their contributions to the Secure Cloud Architecture document. Thanks to everyone. We look forward to further dialogue and comments. You know how to find us all. And thanks again to everyone. We'll look forward to seeing you again at the 4th Secure Cloud Architecture Action Cluster meeting in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Lee.
Okay, well done.